Good morning, everybody. I hope this video finds you in the best of health and spirits. Okay, the name of this video is going to be Quashing Racism, presenting the comprehensive sociocultural constitutional complex. This paper is also tied to my earlier papers on certainty and uncertainty. I hope you have been following all my works and reading all my works. In case you have not, you are welcome to read those because they are available all over the place on the internet. And the objective of this is to quash constructs on racism, which still are current, unfortunately, because most of the studies on race and IQ have been dated to the 1980s and 90s that are utterly obsolete. Some of the assumptions of course are wrong. Please read my papers. I will not be able to review them in detail in this video in the interest of time. The reason for this paper is we need to dismantle colonial constructs. Older paradigms still have currency. This is unfair to people from other parts of the world, non-whites. People from other parts of the world are yet to come up with theories in self-defense. That is why I have proposed this approach. I personally want to put this controversy to rest. There is a need to encourage people from developing countries and people from other parts of the world to achieve more. I hope to put all counter theories to permanent rest as well. If they want to contest me, they are welcome to do so, but it has to be done using a scientific methodology. Okay, I want to put an end to the scourge of racism once and for all. As Martin Luther King famously said in one of his speeches in the 1960s, it is self evident that all men are created equal. However, there is racism, and color is due to a pigment called melanin. Okay, I don't see correlation doesn't imply causation. This doesn't mean that they are inferior in any way genetically. However, they could be cultural and social constructs, which I'll be talking to you about later. Race itself is a hazy, misleading, and an obsolete term. Okay, the American physical anthropologist Ernest A. Houghton defined race. Another race definitions of race have been made by British anthropologist Ashley Montagu, American geneticist and evolutionary biologist Theodosius Dobzhansky, William C. Boyd, Stanley Marion Gahn, Hulse, Gutter Janusz, Mayer, Templeton, and others also have provided. I have reviewed all of these in my paper and I have given my comments. Please read them. Initially, if you want to talk about early racial classifications, initially scientists were primarily concerned with ordering, naming, classifying the diversity of life forms found in Earth. They adopted a taxonomical approach. This was advocated by Carl Linnaeus and others. Okay, and Europeans gradually began exploring other parts of the world, and they encountered different types of people who looked and acted differently. That is why the idea of racism began and racial classifications began. There are different types of early classifications made. For example, Francois Bernier defined people as Europeans, African, Negroes, blacks. However, within Africa itself, you'll find wide genetic variation, diversity. I have written about this in the paper. Please read it also. Otherwise, please refer to it in any textbook on the subject. Asians and labs. Carl Linnaeus also put human beings on top of the nature. Carl Linnaeus also developed separated humans into four basic varieties on the basis of geography, color, humor, posture, and customs, etc. He called them American, European, Asian, and African. Blumenbach also had a large collection of human skulls in his house. He studied them at a great level of depth, and he came up with his own classification. During the 19th century, scientists were mostly measuring human bodies based on cranial morphology, etc. Ritzius and others proposed methodologies such as measurements such as cranial index, etc. And similarly, using morphological data, other researchers such as Kuhn, Gahn, and many other people have come up with definitions. However, these definitions are generally considered to be static. Nowadays, we have the dynamic constructs because people keep on moving from place to place. Otherwise, there's a kind of miscegenation which is always taking place in the world, and there is also some kind of pan mixing, global pan mixing at a global level. This is a little bit small. It happens sometimes in the USA, but generally the cultural, geographical, physical, social, and religious barriers, also linguistic barriers, also which prevent this from taking place on a wide scale. Okay. Then later there was an attempt to classify races within double quotes always because I could not support the term. Based on genetic classification, we had Mendelian genetics and Landstein's ABO groups. And at the end of the First World War in 1919, Hirschfield carried out serological tests. Okay, on large number of soldiers of different nationalities and proposed classification. Similarly, Boyd and others used traits in the blood such as non-adaptive traits. These are all non-adaptive traits such as ABO, RH, MN blood groups, PTC testing ability, ABH secretor system, and other types of non-adaptive morphological traits. Okay. Similarly, many people Transcove and Washburn, Huxley, Deniker, Hutton, Montague, and others also came up with the concept of ethnic group as a replacement for traits. Okay. In the 60s, early 60s, Livingston wrote about the non-existence of races and pointed out that the static notion of races was not compatible with the concept of dynamic solution. Some people like him came up with concepts such as clines. Okay, there were human race was condemned by the UN as early as 1950, and UN statements of race include the statement of race in Paris in July 1950, statement of the nature of race and race differences, Paris June 1951, proposals on the biological aspects of race, Moscow August 1964, statement on race and racial prejudices, Paris September 1967. The United Nations also had a convention on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. Therefore, it argues that discrimination on the basis of race, double within double quotes, is deplorable and condemnable. It cannot be tolerated at all. And we also had Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All Article 2 states everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political, or other opinions, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status. Okay, and the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres also has condemned racism in the strongest possible terms. However, earlier on, around 150 years ago, we had scientific racism. It is a pseudoscientific belief that human races species is divided into biologically distinct taxa called races. It is falsely believes that empirical evidence can be made amenable to the support of racial discrimination in some form or the other. This is also referred to as biological racism. Before the mid 20th century, scientific racism was widely prevalent in the non-scientific community, the scientific community as well to some extent, and among the general public to a much larger extent. However, it is gradually on the wane. It has not been eliminated yet completely. I hope this paper will be small contribution to this because this is a part of my globalization of science mission. I want to help people in developing countries increase their aspiration levels, and I want them to become more ambitious in life. Okay, and all barriers and bottlenecks must go. Scientific racism sometimes has distorted and misrepresented the data from physical anthropology, anthropometry. I hope you know what it is, craniology, and evolutionary biology to propagate these ideas. Okay, this was later criticized by Julian Huxley and Lancelot Hogben and others. Okay, scientific racism led to rules to prevent miscegenation in Alabama and the United States. It's also led to the Jim Crow laws in the United States and apartheid in Saudi Arabia. Okay, some people have said that Rudyard Kipling also, in spite of his love for professed love for India, was a racist in some form or the other. Karl Marx has been accused of being a racist by Eric Landry and others. And Margaret Sanger, in spite of her contributions to the birth control movement, she did support eugenics in some form or the other. Charles Darwin also was considered by some to have racial ideas, but he was not completely racist. Gandhi also did criticize Kafirs in the 1890s. Okay, we also had a movement of eugenics, a movement called eugenics to promote selective breeding. Okay, this term in Greek meant good offspring. It was popular in the early 20th century. It has now faded into oblivion and obscurity. It is based on an incorrect and a prejudiced understanding of Charles Darwin's ideas and Gregor Mendel's work. Okay, this encouraged people of superior stock to reproduce and encouraged people of superior stock to reproduce and discouraged people from so-called inferior stock to reproduce. Okay, Nazi Germany and all that, they used eugenics to support extermination of those who were considered not only racially inferior but socially inferior also. We have two concepts called positive eugenics and negative eugenics. Positive eugenics refers to encouraging people with so-called positive traits to reproduce, while negative eugenics refers to the discouragement of negative people with negative traits to reproduce. Also refer to my three papers on certainty and standard principle. One was the base core paper on certainty and standard principle. It was published in the early part of 2023. Quashing racism was published in 2020. It is based on the certainty and uncertainty principle which I developed. And the third paper was recommending probabilistic approaches for hypothesis evaluation. Okay, this is also develops a scientific, I mean, research design, design. I mean, debates on how to develop research design and develop hypotheses based on certainty and certainty as well. Okay, according to me, you have to identify certainties. You have to identify certainties. Also, you have to weigh certainties against uncertainties continuously. It must be done continuously, and search for uncertainties hypothesis must become mind science along with researchers. This was my second major publication on scientific method. The first one was sociological 1910 rule. Okay, what I have called exceptionism. Okay, and fourth paper was quashing racism. Racism, I have said, can be misused. It is discrimination and prejudice against people based on the color or ethnicity. Okay, some form or other it has existed since ancient times. Racism may be presented in social actions, practices, or political systems that support the expression of prejudice or aversion in discriminatory practice. Okay, it is based on inadequate evidence. Okay, it is difficult to isolate certain factors from uncertain factors. So, read my papers as many times as possible. Just because blacks are good in sports, it doesn't mean that they're inferior intellectually. We need rock solid scholarship for everything, because these concepts and ideas can easily be misused and can be used to put down some classes of people. Okay, we had many black scientists and researchers. Some of them have done exceedingly well, like Barack Obama, and we also have Neil deGrasse Tyson and many other people, Oprah Winfrey and other people. I have discussed all these case studies in my papers also. Okay, while we must indeed pursue the truth at all times, truth is of paramount importance. It is possible that there are differences in cognitive ability. It is possible, but how do you design tests that are absolutely objective? It is very difficult to design rock solid experiments, in my view, that isolate all uncertain factors. James Watson, of a eminent DNA scientist, also claimed that blacks to be intellectually inferior. They created a huge furor. Okay, and this is probably baseless, and he did not base it on any scientific findings at all. We have other black scientists and intellectuals like Rodney Atkins, George Edward Alcon, Harold Amos, and others, etc. Performance will on blacks will only improve as opportunities will improve, because they are being discriminated against in some parts of the world. They creates a reflex action, and they do not choose to participate in higher activities. Of course, there are a lot of other factors also. I will discuss them in the later part of this paper. One can draw a bell curve also, but the IQ tests themselves are somewhat misleading. I've discussed this excellently in my papers. And if you see the history of IQ tests, intelligence tests have been used in some form or the other for well over a century now. The term IQ was coined by William Stem in 1912, and is said to originate from the German term intelligence quotient. Okay, first widely used adaptive intelligence test was developed between the years 1905 and 1908 by the French psychologist Alfred Binet to evaluate school children for intelligence, supposed intelligence. Okay, Binet's tests were extensively modified and translated into English in 1916 by the American psychologist Louis German. The Stanford Binet intelligence tests were also developed with the French psychologist Theodore Seaman. And later, verbal and non-verbal assessments, quantitate, etc., were all added. I've discussed them in my paper. We have had other tests like Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, developed by David Wechsler. The English psychologist and statistician Charles Perman also proposed correlation theory, who stated that subjects who perform well in one subject do well in other subjects as well. And intelligence tests contributions to IQ tests were made by Robert Yates and other people. Today, there are a wide variety of IQ tests in school. Examples being Raven's progressive matrices, Naglieri's nonverbal ability test, Woodstock Johnson's test, the multidimensional aptitude battery (MAP2) test, differential ability scales, Peabody individual achievement test, cartel culture freight, CFIT, etc. There have been, however, many criticisms of IQ tests. The primary criticism of IQ tests that did not take into account consideration and isolate social and cultural factors. These factors such as motivation, desire to perform, linguistic ability, non-cognitive abilities, cultural evolution, cultural empowerment may not be considered. In some IQ tests may not also consider all factors falling under the umbrella of a comprehensive socio-cultural perspective. I've discussed and debated this at length in my papers. Please read it. Therefore, you have to take them with a generous pinch of salt. Different cultures may also value and cherish different goals and ideals, and many cultures may place higher versus weightage one on social and cultural norms and spiritual values, religious values, rather than individual performance, individual accomplishment, and individual achievements. One proof for this is China was at the bottom of the heap scientifically, but now they are doing very well, exceedingly well, past couple of years, and India is following suit. Hopefully, it is also following a same similar trajectory, in my view, but it will take time to manifest itself in terms of hard results. Non-Western cultures also may not place an emphasis on reasoning and computational abstract problem solving ability. They have a different philosophical approach to issues. Okay, and race and IQ studies are also misleading. I've dwelt on this at depth in my papers. And for example, we have Eiforth, whose Eiforth study, who studied children of black soldiers stationed in Germany who were raised by white German mothers. They had a better performance in IQ test. Tizard et al. Also came up with similar results when white Indian, West Indian, white and mixed race children raised in British long stay residential nurseries had higher so-called IQ, higher performance in so-called IQ test. Similarly, Moore also in 1986 came out with a similar study. Please refer to all these on the internet. I can just only brief you a brief summary. I cannot delve into this in depth in interest of paucity of time. And what the comprehensive sociocultural persecution complex says, people will not bother to attempt to perform if they have no chance of succeeding. If they are being comprehensively discriminated against, and this kind of discrimination is deep rooted and foundational, it is also endemic. Okay, this could naturally account for differences in performance. And what I'm only saying is to eliminate all the uncertain factors and then try to develop hypotheses which isolate all these uncertain factors. Similarly, you have an inferiority complex. People from Asia have an inferiority complex because they are not accepted in Western society. Some of them. Inferiority complex is a psychological condition that causes people to feel inadequate or inferior to others. They may suffer from low esteem. They may suffer from persecution complex. Persecution complex is a feeling that of fear that one is an object of collective hostility or ill treatment on the part of others. It may be rational or irrational. You also have a concept of culture of poverty. This was first popularized and conceptualized by anthropologist Oscar Lewis in the 1960s after studying families in Mexico and Puerto Rico. Okay, such feelings have people have hopeless feelings of hopelessness and attitudes of despondency and powerlessness. Okay, therefore they perpetuate their own poverty. It's a vicious cycle of poverty which is being perpetuated. They're entrenched into it with no hope of overcoming such feelings. Okay, and one more concept is aspiration deficit. But due to all these factors are interlinked intrinsically and foundationally, fundamentally. Aspiration deficits means that people don't have high ambitions in life, they don't have high goals in life. Okay, people also have different mind orientations. I have written about mind orientations extensively in my papers. Okay, mind orientation, you have a religious orientation, family orientation, business orientation, etc. etc. You also read my, I have written about this in my papers on symbiotic approach to social culture trade. Also read my concept on thought concepts of thought world, worldviews, mind space, etc. I cannot repeat them here multiple times. Okay, people also have family, business, religious, militant way, personality. There are orientations. People all cultures also have different orientations, like past orientations, future orientation, material orientation, non-material orientation, rational orientation, non-rational orientation, inward orientation, outward orientation. There's a couple of more also. Read my papers fully. These are akin to Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory. Okay, enculturation parenting also plays a role in the performance of children. Parents may be less educated in some countries. You have horizontal, vertical, lateral factors. There is a model how ideas and values are degenerated. You may have cognitive dissonance and self-reinforcing cognitive dissonance. I have written about all these. People also, some groups of people may lack a direction in life. They have absence of suitable role models. They have linguistic disability because all languages are not equally developed, or at least we have what I've called dyslexia. Dyslexia. Okay, lexical development of Indian languages must happen. We also have what is known as verbal intelligence. People who don't speak Languages like English with a technical vocabulary may not be able to express themselves adequately. You also have what is known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis or linguistic determinism. Is the idea that the language a person speaks influences how they think. For example, Eskimos may be able to conceptualize different types of ice is better than an Indian. Okay. We also have concepts of linguistic equality. Please refer to my papers on linguistics and language dynamics. Okay. Till around the 15th, 16th century AD, major Asian languages, including Indian languages, European languages were equal. However, European languages took off at that time in terms of development. Indian languages are now lagging behind somewhat, but this is not hopeless. We can bridge the gap easily. I also spoke about dyslexia, difference between passive and active vocabulary. Okay, Indian languages also were mainly associated with liturgical and sacerdotal evidence. Different people had different goals and ambitions in ancient India. Many of them are farmers, etc. Okay, however, some cultures are also linguistic cultures, like France. Some may not. Cultures may not give a lot of importance to language. Okay, I have also spoken about the need to develop non-dominant languages lexically and empower so-called linguistic have-nots. I have written about that also there. Okay, the Flynn effect is another very important effect. The Flynn effect is the phenomenon of increasing average intelligence quotient or IQ scores over time in developed countries. This is named after the researcher James Flynn who discovered it. Okay, this happens due to many factors such as improved nutrition, better education system, growing up with fewer siblings, etc. The Flynn effect has been demonstrated across the world, but it is slowing down in developed countries and it's increasing in developing countries. We also have the Abraham Maslow's theory of hierarchy, which is very important. People pay a lot of importance to the psychological needs like food, water, shelter, sleep. Then they think about safety needs, then love and belonging, then self-esteem, and then only self-actualization. Therefore, developing countries may take time to catch up. But religious modes to some castes may not have been allowed to travel overseas in India in ancient times, and people have different mind orientations generally. IQ, of course, itself does not translate into performance at all times. For example, there was a genius called William James Sidis. He had the highest IQ ever recorded in the world, but he did not achieve anything substantial. He wrote a book which is not rated very highly. I have also personally met many Senegalese and Nigerians. One defeated me in chess, and one I had met in the Middle East. Of course, I'm not a chess player, but I'm not. He was a professional, but I could make out that he was very intelligent. Okay, it's also personal taste also counts. I know folks who like darker skinned people. Okay, so I have written about solutions to this in my paper, like anti-discrimination legislation, equality of opportunity, social empowerment, cultural development, corporate legislation, educational reform, access to science, etc. And so, what I would like to suggest to my fellow readers here is that this is a part of my globalization of science initiative. People in developed countries and people who have been were discriminated against over the past couple of decades or years or centuries. Keep your chin up, keep your head up. This is another string to your bow. Hitch your wagon to your star and march ahead boldly and confidently. Think big, dare big, and above all, be big. Thank you very much again for giving me a patient here. Bye.